Good evening, everyone. My name is Jada Richardson. I'm Deputy Director of Housing Services here for the City of York. We also have Tammy Harvey Bethea here. She's our program funding analyst. Thank you all for being here with us today. We're going to have a presentation from our consultant, Donna King. But I just wanted to set a little bit of ground rules before we got started. After the presentation, there's going to be time for comment, but this is being live streamed, so if you could all come to the podium to speak so that people who are watching live can hear you as well. And try to limit your remarks to 3 to 5 minutes so that there's time for everyone to speak. Yes, Cliff is handling the camera, so people will be able to see. But just wanted to set that rule, and with that, we can get started.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight for this public hearing. And my name is Donna King. I'm the Senior Project Manager from M&L Associates, which is a consulting firm that the City of York has hired to assist with the planning process for this consolidated plan. So I'm just going to go over some of the basics for those of you that may not be familiar with these types of programs for the Community Development Block Grant, the CDBG program, as well as the Home Investment Partnership Grant program. And we've already done those. So what we're going to be going over in the presentation is just providing you with an overview of what the 5-year consolidated plan process is, provide you with some of the basics as far as eligible activities, which these funds can be used for, as well as giving you the opportunity as the citizens to provide some input on what the community development needs for housing or services within the City of York. And 5-year consolidated plan is a requirement from HUD for the city to do every 5 years, which is a planning process that assesses what the conditions are in the community and sets what the priority needs are. And then it will establish the goals and objectives based on that information. It will cover the period from 2025 through 2029. So it will start as of January 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2029. And this is a requirement for HUD for entitlement funds. And these funds come from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and they're received on an annual basis as long as the federal government continues to fund the program and as long as HUD continues to prioritize these funding levels. And the consolidated plan process, and there's also an action plan that we're working on at the same time. Stakeholder consultation is what we've been doing the past couple of days. We've met with a lot of different service providers as well as affordable housing partners within the community to discuss what are the most pressing needs. There's also a housing and homeless needs assessment and housing market analysis, which is processing data from American Community Survey, which is census data that estimates, what the conditions are as far as demographics, poverty levels, housing conditions, and all that information is put together along with citizen input in the stakeholder consultation to set what those priority needs are. The strategic plan is then developed based on that, compilation of information and establishes those priority needs and establishes the framework of how the funds will be used for the next 5 years. As part of that, there's also an annual action plan. So the overarching strategic plan will just be more general what the goals and objectives are, whereas the annual action plan will establish what the actual projects will be to meet those goals and objectives. And citizen outreach is part of the process, starting with this public hearing. There will also be other opportunities. There will be opportunities to comment during the meeting, as well as opportunities throughout the process through public comment period once the draft is available. And there would be a second public hearing that will be scheduled later on. Okay, and the purpose of the meeting is just to also provide you information about the CDBG and home programs, get your, views and comments on those most concerning, conditions within your community, and using this information to create the consolidated plan. Now, for a community development block grant, basic activities, it is very flexible funding. It can be used for a lot of different projects, including housing. Housing projects would be housing rehabilitation and homeownership assistance. There's also funds can be used for public facilities improvements. Blight removal, which would be like a clearance demolition if you have any type of deteriorated, vacant structures within your community. Funds can be used for that. It can be used for code enforcement as another way to provide other improvements to the community. Economic development, acquisition of real property. Acquisition project would be using the CDBG funds to purchase land that would be used for another public purpose. So it would be, you could use the land for affordable housing or public improvement like a park facility or a community center type structure. And then funds can also be used for public services, and those would be any type of services that are provided by nonprofit agencies or services that are provided internally by the City of York as well. There are some limitations on public services. HUD does limit the amount that can be spent on an annual basis to 15% of the total allocation. And this is just a representative list of the types of programs that these funds can be used. One of the other conditions that HUD puts on use of funds for public services is that it needs to be a new service or an increased level of existing service, over what the government provided the year before. So think of CDBG funds as funds that are used to make improvements at a higher level than what was provided before, as opposed to just maintaining the constant. The ineligible activities, CDBG funds cannot be used for political activities, so nothing can be used for lobbying type activities. CDBG funds cannot be used to construct new housing by the unit of local government, and funds can't be used for general purpose of government. So no operations, maintenance costs, or constructing buildings that are just for your basically conduct of business. There's no purchase of equipment, with very limited exceptions, and no direct income payments. The exceptions for income payments is for like rental utility assistance. Funds can be provided for a maximum of 3 consecutive months, and those payments have to go directly to whoever the funds are owed to. So if it's rental assistance, the landlord would be paid directly as opposed to funds being provided to the beneficiary. And now, meeting a national objective for CDBG funds, all funds that are spent need to meet one of these 3 national objectives. The primary one being that it's going to benefit persons that are low or moderate income. And 70% of the funds need to go towards that type of benefit. We refer to it as an LMI benefit. You can also use then up to 30% of your funds to prevent or eliminate blight, which would be like a clearance demolition activities. And then the third one, meeting urgent needs, is that if there's a threat to health and safety, that there's no other funds that are available. It's not usually used for your regular CDBG funds, but in the event of a disaster, it's something that's an option. Okay, and then in order to meet a low and moderate income benefit, the LMI benefit, there's a couple of different ways that HUD allows. You can do it as an area benefit. So there are qualified census tract block groups that data has been provided that would show that 51% or more of the population within that census tract block group are LMI. And so that type of an activity would be for like a street improvement, sidewalk improvement, parks, community centers, things like that. And it would be based on who would use that facility or benefit from the improvements. Income intake for a direct service benefit for like rental assistance, home ownership, down payment assistance. Those it has to be, that's the more, labor intensive income intake where you have to collect the pay stubs, bank statements in order to document and show that the person is meeting the income requirements. And the chart to the right on the slide provides information on the 2024 HUD income limits for the CDBG program. So persons that apply for those direct benefits would have to, be at or below this 80% of the area median income. It is adjusted by household size, so smaller households have a lower income threshold as opposed to the larger households. Activities also can meet the low and moderate income benefit through a presumed benefit if they belong to a subpopulation that HUD presumes to be low income. And those subpopulations include children that have been abused, domestic violence victims, elderly persons, and elderly. HUD's definition for elderly is 62 years of age or older. Persons that are disabled, persons that are homeless, adults that are illiterate, migrant farm workers, and persons living with AIDS. So in those instances, if it's a presumed benefit, then the separate income data does not need to be collected. And for home investment partnership program, those dollars can only be used for specifically housing related activities. So they can be used, same as CDBG, they can be used for housing rehabilitation and home ownership assistance, but you can also use it for new construction of affordable housing. Funds can be used for tenant-based rental assistance, which is a shorter term, medium term rental assistance up to 2 years, and it works the same as like a Section 8 voucher. So it's meeting, the grant would cover the difference between what would be affordable to the low income household versus what the rent is actually for that. So and it's tenant based, so the tenant, the beneficiary selects, where they choose to rent. And now for 2025, the estimated funding is based on the 2024 levels. This is a federal program, so it's dependent on the HUD or the budget being adopted at the federal level, and then HUD doing their formula calculations and determining how much in funds the City of York will receive. For CDBG, the amount that's available on an annual basis and what we'll use to project for this consolidated planning process is a bit more than 1.3 million, and the Home Investment Partnership Program is 484,000. There are some funds that are set aside for planning administration. So for CDBG, that's 20% of the total dollars. For home, that's 10%. And then there's an additional prior, obligation for a loan, a Section 108 loan for a project that was done a few years ago, which that repayment is a little bit over 200,000 on an annual basis until it's paid in full. So that leaves a little bit more than 800,000 available for CDBG funds for other activities for just fiscal year 2025. Understand that this amount for the purpose of the 5-year plan. We're going to use that estimate for the full 5 years when we establish the goals and how much in funding would go towards each of those goals. Okay, and now at this point will be the time for public input. So anyone that's interested in coming up and speaking, just go on the honor system and 3 to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Don Hake. I'm not with any organization. I'm a tax-paying resident. I want to read a resolution that was passed unanimously by York City Council, and I won't go into the detail. I'll just read the resolution. Therefore, be it resolved by the Council of the City of York, Pennsylvania, as follows. 1, the City of York will join other leading town and cities in the national movement to support transition to 100% clean and renewable energy community-wide. 2, the City of York will interpret clean, renewable energy as energy generated from renewable sources such as wind, solar, small hydro, tidal, fuel cells, and geothermal, with locally produced and distributed energy prioritized wherever feasible for the many advantages it provides to the community. And 3, and this is the most relevant part, the City of York will partner with county and state legislators and organizations in determining a long-term clean energy plan, and the public will have opportunities to provide feedback in the implementation process, and the city will ensure that benefits of a transition will include low-income and marginalized residents. So I think we have a very underemphasized situation. Our world is suffering significant climate challenges, and York should be part of that. If we are concerned with providing housing, then I would like to see that housing become LEED certified, so that at the very least it will not add to the energy burden of the city. And in closing, I will say that that resolution was passed in September of 2019. We're still waiting for the plan, but I hope someday we will see that. Thank you.
Ryan Subler, do I direct them to you, or? My question is, so we're looking at maybe like 1.8 million, right? Just for the 1 year, and then for over the 5 years, maybe 9 million. What kind of projects can you do, or what has been done with that 9 million for communities like this kind of thing? I guess is my question. Like, what can be done in this age of like inflation, high costs with the materials and stuff like that, and labor shortages, and that's kind of where I'm going with that. Just a general sense.
Like what city was it compared to?
Yeah, kind of like what are general ideas that you can, what other towns have done something like that, kind of comparable to York as a third-class city, 40-some thousand people, and $9 million in this day and age kind of thing.
I think the answer to your question is that there are a variety of projects that we could do with this funding, whether they be for housing, public services. Right now, this discussion is more tailored to what you think we should be doing.
Okay.
Not necessarily what has been done.
Okay.
What you think we should be spending the money to.
Okay, I'm just trying to do a different comparison from the ARPA, since like that was 36 million.
Right.
And I know we can do a lot more with
Right,
that.
and that's where when disasters happen, and that was in response to basically a national disaster, there's always way more funding available than in these annual, renewable entitlement programs. There is a variety of projects that they usually undertake, and it's a combination of housing rehab, home ownership, public services to assist with homeless populations, as well as other services that are needed. And then, depending on what the needs are for infrastructure, in the past, those are the types of projects. But the part of this process is to find out from you, the community, what exactly you think is the highest priority needs. And then they use that information to assist in making those decisions as what those goals will be set for that 5-year period of time. And while these are all eligible projects, as far as the list, it's best for the community to make the decision as far as what is the best allocation of those resources. Because there are some projects that will cost a lot more money and not necessarily have the same benefit or may benefit less people. So what is the best use of the funds? And that's where we're asking, you and the community, based on your experience on what you see day to day, what are things that, based on that list of what can be done, using the funds, what do you think should be done, as Jada said?
Okay.
I have a question. Who are the entities that will make the ultimate decision as to how the funds are utilized? Will it be the mayor, will the federal, who are the gatekeepers?
I'm just going to sit over here so I can talk into the microphone. But it's the Bureau of Housing Services that determines how to allocate the funding in our community. The mayor, there are obviously checks and balances, so the mayor does have to approve what we determine, but we make the decision for how to allocate the funds to that department.
How many people will that entail? How large is that organization?
Well, we have a team of 2, but we work with the DECD staff, so we have our director who is here tonight, and other members of our team who we pulled in to help evaluate the applications over the and that's kind of like a panel process.
Along with the mayor's input.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I think I just want to piggyback off of what Ryan was saying. So if we the public and we don't have a professional opinion on how this money actually works or where it should actually be allocated to, I think what he's saying and what we would probably like to know or would be important to know is what have been done in other places that work for communities like this, so we would even know what to pick from to say what we even want. Or so you would even know what worked in other places to give us a list of things that may have worked, so we can say, hey, let's go with that. But
Thank you.
for us to be the professionals, I'm saying,
So that's the question is for people who are watching online is what models there are, what other communities are doing with their CDBG funding. Today's meeting is so that we can share with the community what the parameters around this funding are and the types of projects and uses that are eligible to use this funding for, and to hear from the community what they would like us to prioritize. Currently, I'm going to read a list of what our existing projects are that we have been funding in our community. You'll probably be familiar with some of them. So we provide funding to CASA with their services that they provide in the community. We support our code enforcement team here in the city. We provide funding to the Literacy Council for GED programs, housing rehab programs for owner-occupied to do habitability repairs. We do home buyer assistance, so that's like closing and down payment assistance. Other public services such as LifePath. We provide funding to our Public Works Department, and then we also provide funding to different affordable housing providers to build affordable housing in the community. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and
Okay.
then I'd like to advocate for, of course, like the whole array of housing from the lowest level to all kinds of levels. To further go into saying that we need to hire local within town, source in town, all levels of contractors, making sure that we're building our own people up, not just trying to give someone a handout, but also trying to give them a hand up. And then to also focus on different modes of transportation, that we shouldn't just focus on the car or the bus, but making sure the city's walkable. Since our school district is a walkable school district, we want to make sure our students are safe from leaving the house and getting to school. Making sure that the sidewalks are free of debris, the trees are properly trimmed, no broken glass or any kind of other materials, and that they feel safe to walk to school. So I think that should also be part of that. I think the other one is, if all these other programs are in effect, so it's just kind of supplementing them, I guess, is making sure that they're staying afloat.
Yeah, thank you. And also just to add, it doesn't have to be programs that are existing. This is an opportunity, like if you have an idea of something that you feel that we could be doing, this is the opportunity to share that. So even if you feel that it hasn't been done before, that's not an issue to let us know that it's an opportunity.
Hello, my name is Kelly Adams. We live in the 400 block of West Market Street, and one of the things that's very obvious to us in that location is the homeless issue around Union Lutheran Church and the Mission on the next block. There are obviously great needs for housing for the homeless and other services that the city could provide. Now, again, I probably share Ryan's concern. It doesn't seem to me, I served on a affordable housing committee for a few years, and one of the issues that we kept running into was the mounting cost of construction of new facilities or even the renovation of new facilities. I know we were looking at a project just outside the city, and when all of the numbers came in, it ended up at like $350,000 a unit. Well, that doesn't make much sense to spend $350,000 for a unit for low-income housing or moderate-income housing or affordable. I guess affordable housing is the proper term, and I'm just wondering if the amounts that we're talking about is in both of the funds, the Home Fund and the CBGB or whatever. that was a nightclub in New York, I think, at one time. But if those funds are sufficient to really do anything to address not only the homeless need, but also the affordable housing need. We have a lot of people in the city who are living in substandard housing and really need some assistance to move into safe and dry and protected, affordable housing, and without that basis to live in, young people have trouble getting to school, and we have trouble with truancy, and we have trouble with a lot of other issues. So I just don't know if the amounts of money that we're talking about here are going to be sufficient to really address many of the problems that we have. I think we need to focus certainly on taking care of what we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Anthony Moore with Four Squares Construction. My partner Fred Walker and I have a office right beside the Princess Street Center. And when we think about these funds, as both the gentlemen before me kind of eloquently explained, it's not a lot of money, right? And so when you think about it, I think you guys are already doing a great job of dispersing what you do have amongst all these different, umbrellas or ancillary units. But for what we see walking around, we get, comments quite a bit from, elderly and economically constrained folks who actually own their homes, but on the brink of being uninhabitable. You know what I mean? So you look at windows and roofs and things of that sort. Folks are literally on the verge of not being able to live in their houses, right? If you walk around the area, you see that there are a lot of homes owned by, I'll just go ahead and say it, slumlords, right? Folks who don't take care of their properties, they're renting them out. People are living in pretty much third world conditions or homeless. So I didn't catch your name, the gentleman before me, but if we figure out how to not necessarily spread the money so thinly amongst all these different organizations and really focus in on a couple of areas, which in my opinion would be the program you guys already have around, helping folks, winterize their homes or weatherize their homes, fix the windows, fix the roofs. I think they're like, low interest loans or grants or things of that sort. And blight reduction / code enforcement to figure out, for these folks who own their homes, is there something? Like I don't know the laws particularly around eminent domain, but if these are folks who have not paid taxes, are not maintaining their properties adequately, or in a position to where they just won't, what ramifications or remedies, does the city have to force them out? You know what I mean? Like people should not be allowed to live in these types of conditions. So in my opinion, with these funds being as limited as they are, we're not going to solve the homeless situation. We're not going to make a big splash in services, but if we focused on the folks who are already in homes, who are on the verge of losing, if we can figure out how we can help them, create a safe environment to live in, I would concentrate funds there. And if there's funds to be able to, figure out whether it's legal cost or whatever the case is of figuring out how to get these properties from the grips of these slumlords so that they can be renovated. Because literally, as Ryan was saying, with the construction costs and labor costs, material costs being as high as they are, $1 million ain't gonna do nothing. You know what I mean? That's probably good for 3 or 4 houses, realistically speaking. But, $1 million spread into $50,000 grants to help people weatherize their homes and stay in their properties. Otherwise, we're gonna have an even larger homeless situation a few years from now. You know what I mean? When code enforcement's come knocking on the door and saying, hey, this property is no longer inhabitable. You know what I mean? So I would, in my opinion, take those funds, narrow the focus, make a splash in a couple of different areas versus spreading it so thin and making a small ripple. You know what I mean? So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't have too much of a voice. Diane Glover Brown, city resident, also York City School Board Director. Also, I sit as a layperson who works with the York City Housing. The last 12 years, I sat as a layperson to review these grants and funding and programs, and as an appointment during Kim Bracey's era, so I still do that to this day. But one of the things I wanted to talk about today, and I think all the programming and funding is fine, but it just always confused me, for lack of a better word, as to the outreach that is done by the city to make sure residents can take advantage of these programs. I'm not sure how it's marketed, because a lot of the programs and funding, if I didn't sit as the layperson during those committee meetings, I wouldn't know about it to tell other people about it. So I think that's something maybe looking, going into the next 5 years, we need to do a better job of. Also, I like what Mr. Moore said, and Ryan, and I just called this young man's name Jacob, Brian. As far as the funding, yes, we're not going to, there's a lot of things the money could be used for, but I think we need to use it more wisely and put more into repair of these homes before they become blighted. So I think that's something we really should look at. I did complete the Survey Monkey, and I wasn't sure, as far as the total of those results. You're going to do more meetings, I think, and then look at all the results of the Survey Monkey before decisions are made. That's what. Okay. I think that was the main thing. Again, I like what Mr. Moore said, Ryan said, and Mr. Bryan over here. Repairs are needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Donna, can you talk a little bit about the breakdown? I got a question about just the overall expenses and how we have to set aside the 20% for our admin.
Right. So for the CDBG, it's a difficult program to implement. So HUD does allow the 20% for admin and planning. So that would come off of the top of that 1.3 million. So that puts it down a little bit more than 1.1 million. There's an additional 208,000 per year. That is the loan repayment for the 108 program project from a few years ago. And that would be a repayment that's made annually until that loan is paid off, which we have 38, which is 14 years, basically 14 more years of that. So it's a little bit more than 800,000 that would be left. And those funds, as far as prioritization, they'll determine what's the best use of them, among the different projects. Besides that, they can use up to 15% for the public services. So if they're doing that 15% is off the 1.3 million, not the remaining funds. And then if in supporting those objectives for public services, it would leave, I'd say maybe 600,000, a little bit over 600,000, just doing the math on that. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it's still 600,000 that the city didn't have available before, and, thinking about, ways that these funds can also, leverage perhaps other funding sources, any other private, funds that would be available as well. So, for example, there's a lot of leverage. So a lot of funds are leveraged, for down payment assistance, because you have additional funds that go into helping the person become a homeowner, including the mortgage that goes into it. And what down payment assistance does is it just bridges that gap between what isn't affordable and what is affordable as far as a mortgage payment, for that household. So that's an example of how these CDBG funds are leveraged, because it's a small amount to help somebody become a homeowner, where without that down payment assistance, they would still be a renter.
Question, I think you were asking it, is that mandatory, the 20%?
No, but it's what's needed in order to implement the program, because that covers staff costs.
So the powers that be
Mm-hmm.
that are distributing the funds can operate at a lower administrative cost level. It could go into it's not a mandatory 20%. Am I understanding that correctly? I think that's the question.
No, it's not mandatory. The only set aside that's mandatory would be the home 15% for set aside for Chodo. But it's not. Yeah, well, right. As far as meeting national objectives, but it is a decision. Understand that programs aren't going to move forward. Funds won't be spent unless you have staff there to implement the programs, and that's why HUD does understand that they're labor intensive, like the amount of work, the amount of planning that goes into these, as well as not only planning but also reporting, because there's reporting that takes place as well. Following all the rules and regulations and strings that are attached to these funds is something that requires, staff time and having people available for that. Even if there was an option of, just basically subawarding it out to subrecipients, there's still a responsibility for the City of York to perform the compliance and oversight of it, because just because the City of York subawards it to another agency doesn't mean that they're not responsible for making sure that funds are spent, accurately. So you have to have, people, you have to have staff. If it's not paid for by the grant, then it would have to be paid for by your general revenue, because you can't move the programs along. I can tell you cannot move the programs along without having people present. One of the things about City of York is that you don't have an issue with timeliness. You don't have where HUD is concerned about the funds not being spent, because that's something that if the funds aren't spent, then you risk losing them. Or if programs, there are very high risks for these. If programs aren't implemented correctly, then there is a liability for HUD to recapture those funds for a project that's already been done. So, there's just a lot involved in this, that for the purpose of this meeting is just to find out how do you think, the funds that are available should be used. As citizens, knowing, what's needed in the community. All of the extra stuff that, having to meet the rules and requirements of these programs, that's, the team, with the City of York, for them to do, and that's where those funds come from.
I got a question. So,
Gito, can you use the microphone, please? Thank you.
pretty loud.
It's live streaming, remember?
I'm Gito G's. I heard in the past certain construction companies or smaller construction companies, particularly minority companies, don't be able to meet the requirements to be included in these big contracts. I'm not sure what the requirements may be for them to be included in some of these government contracts or bigger contracts. So is it any mentorship or training programs that y'all thinking about implementing, or whatever initiatives to, train or mentor these smaller construction companies to be able to be included, especially the minority companies, to be included in the conversation or in the contracts?
I know that there's a level of awareness of the need for the workforce development. I can't say that there's any program in the works, but I think that's a great comment, and we can add that into the plan. So, thank you.
Maryland Hake resident. I just also want to, what Mr. Moore was talking about, you don't have to look very far. Northeast Neighborhood, we've got a program going on. It's the NIP project. And we're in the second year, I think, of that, right? Sort of. And it's a neighborhood improvement project. And we have gotten $55,000 from the York County YCCF, Community Foundation. And we went door to door. We put together our own criteria based on, of course, what YCCF, but we just put new windows in a lady's house, and that the windows were not even squared. But I mean, it was horrible. Her heating bills were outrageous, and she couldn't afford them even being on a budget. Then at the end of the year, she gets socked with a big amount. We have just put siding where siding was missing.
we only have 55,000 and we're allowing about like 7 to 10,000 to do these projects. But we've gone door to door and talked to the people that live in the neighborhood. And even if it's just giving them new front door, painting, sealing off that wood, like Mr. Moore said, this money can go a whole lot further, and you will be preventing homelessness. You will be preventing folks having to go in some sort of public housing because they will be able to stay in their homes. So you just have to look over there, and you have a thing that's working already, unlimited funds.
Thank you.
Manuel Gomez, definitely not shy. I wanted to listen a little bit, and it's surprising to me that nobody brought up the previous action plans. If you quote from your previous plan, it says, and these are some of the main points: provide housing opportunities for an economically and culturally diverse community by the year 2021. Provide safe and efficient access to and within the city for all modes of transportation by the year 2021. I would say those are two swings and a miss. I'm going to speak in a very self-interested way. I don't usually do this. Maybe it's because the rostrum is facing that way. You know, I'm used to speaking this way. I made the choice, and there's a reason I'm going to go into this commentary based off of some previous meetings here in the city. I made the choice 18 years ago that my household wouldn't be vehicle dependent. And I've sat here previously, especially over the last several months, they've been speaking about those of us that choose to use mass transit and not be vehicle dependent, and otherwise as if we're aliens or we don't exist. Part of the problem with these strategic plans is you have lagging indicators. That's another thing that hasn't been mentioned. By the time you put the plan into place, what's already here, those shifts have taken place. Your ability to adapt is hamstrung. I get it. Much of this, you're following protocol that's set in place. There's not much flexibility. But I do know that certain things that we can accomplish, perhaps we're not setting our eyes where we should be. The neighborhood I live in the Northeast, is probably one of the more densified from what I can gather. I moved away and came back, and I see people walking that look like me. I see couples. I see people walking their dogs. When I'm running, I see other people running. I didn't see as much of that before. It's there. It's all over the place. But the infrastructure to do so much of what we do every day, it's not there. More so, and I joke about this, but it's not so much of a joke sometimes. That's the type of thing that'll keep someone like me here. When I constantly, because I can go anywhere, when I constantly say to myself, what would take me away from the beautiful relationships I've built in York? What would take me away again? Of course, you have the common stuff like jobs and all that type of thing. This infrastructure just doesn't do it for me. The lack of comfort, the lack of safety. I'm not talking the preposterous stuff of don't go to the city. I'm a city rat through and through. It's not that. It's the lack of infrastructure. Try crossing the street with me a couple times, several times a day where I live. It's bad. It's bad. I joke all the time, I don't want to be roadkill. You can't do basic things, whether it's exercise, recreation. And I'm grown. Imagine what the children have to face. Imagine what somebody that's not able-bodied or able to move around as swiftly has to face, because I think about that often as well. I don't know why I've heard recently that public transportation here, there's no need. I ride the bus every single day. It's bursting at the seams. Yes, it's only certain routes. Those needs are not being met either. And I'm not sure, well, I'm going to be frank. I do know why certain interests are met and certain others are not. Not everybody's so vocal. And a lot of times those that are in those spheres of economic activity, which is fine, we need that, they're very vocal because they want to meet their interests and they want to get their projects off the ground. And you have other folks that have other spheres of activity that they want to be met. But you have some basic needs that we're missing. And if you look through each consolidated action plan, or if you've been here over the last 20 years and watch when it passes through council, because it's not just this. It's not just this. There's checks and balances, there's other parts to the process. And when you see what actually gets funded and what doesn't get funded, regardless of what the strategic plan is itself, and the fact that those lagging indicators are not met, our black market housing is probably more robust and vigorously active than the above market housing. It's not something that's acknowledged. And you could throw all the code enforcement you want at it, but that's a reaction. And you can't say you don't see what's out there. If I see it, other people are seeing it too. It's a question of, are these just formalities? Or is it really something where we want to change and be a little bit more adaptive? And how much are we doing with the flexibility we do have? What are we doing with the flexibility we do have? I know for certain that there's some. I don't want to blame the current administration for some of the processes, and I'll just call them sins of the past. I know how some of the CDBG funds have been used previously, and we've lost money, and we've come under a suspicious gaze at times. And I know that we're improving. When they talk about marketing things better and better outreach, that's on us. With the staff we have on hand, I mean, it's sometimes a miracle you can get the word out to the way that you can. There's always more that you can do. But some of that is on us. If we're not out there and we're not involved, we're not actually making it something that is living. It's just words on a paper. It's another remote report. It's another committee meeting. And then that's where it dies. That's where it dies. I've seen too many of these. There's people that have seen more. But I really want to know what happened with things like the Complete Communities Initiative. How much of the internal sync is actually happening so that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing? I talk to a lot of people, and when you say, why are the crosswalks not visible? You're talking basic infrastructure. And they say, well, this department doesn't know who to get with in that department. What's the point of the money? What's the point of dispersing funds and putting projects into place if you can't even execute at a very basic level? These are the things I notice from a very, very, very low perch from where I stand. Basics.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm back. And I'm normally an idea guy, so I'm trying to figure out some solutions because you guys are asking for some feedback and some things that perhaps we can do a little differently. And I'm still kind of on the soapbox of figuring out how to concentrate efforts. And so I'll just ask, like, would it be possible to, like, over the next 5 years, with these home and CBD dollars, concentrate your efforts in a particular neighborhood, like Northeast or Salem Square or whatever the case is? Would it be possible to do that, make a splash, maybe go around and, you know, help the folks who, I love what you all are doing over there. That's brilliant that y'all did that with only, you know, $55,000. But that type of impact in an area would send shockwaves, right? So I feel like there's always going to be questions of, where'd the money go? Where'd the money go? But if you can hang your hat and say, hey, look, we went here, kind of like what you guys are doing with the Connected Communities Initiative, but on a grander scale in a sense. Like, is there a way to pick a specific area, make a big splash, and then do that over the next few years so that over the 5 years, the 4 or 5 areas that are targeted actually rise with the tide? You know, like, that's just something to consider.
Just to touch on the Complete Communities Initiative, there have been staffing changes that have kind of put a pause in the program, but the economic development specialist, that position has been recently filled, and so the initiative will be getting back up and running to be back in the community.
Before I miss this, once again, Manuel Gomez, the missing middle housing. And the very strategic, targeted approach to economic development that I heard also over the last 2 years now. Please, I would like for the city to keep that up. I know that it was that was a swing and a miss, but it was pretty invigorating for me to see that level of planning and that strategic approach to a very complicated economic development problem, but anytime that you expand the housing, you can help us. And that's something that I want to keep I want the city to keep that in mind. And I said it's complicated myself, but to be quite honest, we sometimes complicate things to a degree that perhaps we shouldn't. Sometimes you need the solution, a nice, scalable solution like the residential economic development overlays is something that I don't want the city to move away from. This initial approach maybe wasn't met with some of the support that some of us would have liked. I think that we should keep going in a similar vein because, once again, the underground market for housing is going to go nowhere because it just can't. You have populations that have arrived. They're not arriving. That's not a theory. They're here. They're going to find a way. This is human nature, and they have found a way. That's where you get into these substandard housing situations largely. And when it comes to code enforcement, unfortunately, I got to mention this. I looked at the survey, and some of those questions, that's one heck of a temperature check. If you have not looked at that survey on the city's website, is it the one with the 59 questions? Does anybody know? Because if it is, that's a temperature check. Let me just say, some of the questions that were there, certainly some of our feedback, if you haven't taken it, it's definitely been taken to heart. And you can tell by some of the questions that were asked. It's pretty interesting in terms of even code enforcement. One thing that I would say is you have to look at where your code enforcement happens and what are the actual impacts. What are the actual impacts? How many times do you employ your code enforcement and what has been whatever you want to determine is a success rate as a city? It can't just be we sent them out and it can't just be we go where we're told to go. Too often that's used as a club depending on what set of action is to follow. It may sound cynical, but often we would see over the years a clean sweep, a clean sweep, a clean sweep. And I tell everybody, since I'm always at council, wait for it, a project is coming through. And that's typically what happens. You see the same thing with code enforcement. It's not something that is necessarily there to be the thing that it's portrayed, unfortunately. And I have personal experience, and I know I'm not the only one. If you talk to a lot of business people, they'll tell you the same thing. The responsiveness is not always as equitable as it may seem.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nona Watson. I am the Director of Economic and Community Development. Just wanted to stand before you because we know why we are all here tonight. However, there have been so many great points that were brought up on tonight, and I just wanted to stand up and address some of them. My sister there, I don't know your name. What is your name? Diane. In reference to marketing. So there have been so many changes with our Department of Economic and Community Development. We are finally at a place where we are fully staffed, and it has been a road, but we now have our Economic Development Specialist. We have Jada, who is actually going to be official June 19th. James Crosby, he is actually retiring, but we have so many great things in the works. Our economic development specialist, he's working on our marketing strategy, and I have to agree with you. We have to get the word out. I have been places and I've heard some of our seniors say, oh, I didn't know about that. You know, so I'm totally in agreement with you. We're going to take care of that. Okay. Anthony, great points that you made in reference to finding out how we can come together, which is really why I created the Complete Communities Initiative. Yes, we had some setbacks because of staffing. However, we are ready to go again. Okay, and the purpose of Complete Communities is to work with our partners to say, okay, you know what, we're going to go into a particular neighborhood and we're going to make it work. We're going to do some serious revitalization in those neighborhoods. So we started out in the Northeast neighborhood. We're not done with the Northeast neighborhood. We're going to Salem Square next. We're on our way there as well. And the purpose of that is to say, not to say, well, what can the city do? Well, the city needs to do this and the city needs to do that. It's not about that. It's about what do you do? And what do you do? And what do you do? And how can we all come together and bring what we do and go in and revitalize our neighborhoods? That's what we want to do. So, yes, I'm totally in agreement with that. Totally in agreement with the point about repairs. And even with the ARPA funding, that was one of the requests that I had, that instead, because now in the blight program, it comes through my department. Instead of us waiting for a property to become blighted and then go after, someone and say, hey, either this or we're going to have to take your property. Instead of doing that, let's find out what we can do to prevent people from losing their homes, especially our seniors. I tell my testimony everywhere I go. I have a mother who is 102 years old, and just like I want my mother to be taken care of, that's what I want to do for our seniors here in the neighborhood, okay? So we want to make sure that everyone is okay. Was there another point? I just wanted to... Yes.
We only get such a minute amount per project.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And when I was here the first time, because this is my second time here with the city, when I was here the first time, I served as deputy of housing, and I had 13 employees working with me. We are down to 2 employees. Okay. Same project, they still have to do the work, okay, no matter what. And not only that, I'll tell you this too, even with the ARPA funds that we got, these same people work these ARPA projects and all the services. And it has been a heavy lift. So I just ask you all to be patient with us. Oh, and to your point, I love this guy right here. This guy right here. Oh, my goodness. But you made a point in that you're always here. You are always, I'm getting emotional about that, because when you said that it is our responsibility to get out there and also pass the word along, you're absolutely right. And you're seated right there. So I just want you to know I appreciate you for that. And I hear you when you say different things, and I make my notes. Where you work? No, I was just saying. I think we need you on our team. But anyway, I just wanted to address some of those things and say, you guys are right on point or whatever. My hope, even with some of the ARPA funds, if we don't spend all those ARPA funds, I want to try to figure out a way how we can reallocate some of that money and start helping those people who have those code enforcement citations, or some of our seniors who are having problems. How can we get that money out to those people as well? So I just wanted to address some of those things. So thank you very much.
Are there any additional comments? No? Okay. Okay, well, in that case, I think we can say thank you all for being here tonight. If you look on the screens, this is also online. We have a QR code you can scan to complete the survey, or you could go to the link. If you have the printout, you can just type that in. But please complete the survey. Please provide some feedback. If there are things that come up when you leave here, you can go on there and complete the survey through the end of the month and just let us know what your thoughts are. Thank you again for coming out tonight.